Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Interim Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs, here with your spectacular host, Ben Wiggins.
Thanks, Shannon. How's it going?
It's great. I already know the answer to this because we talk often, but how was your holidays?
The holidays were nice. We spent some time with Maddie's family, and we're actually catching up on Christmas with my family over the next few weeks. But yeah, we had some good times in Dallas, and holidays turned out nice. How about you?
It was good. It was good. We got to see my family a little bit, and then Ryan's family outside, and so it felt safe as things can be right now. And it was really refreshing. It felt relatively normal, even though it was, really small, and we exercised a lot more care than we might normally to keep a distance and stay outside and things like that. But it felt really nice to get back to, or to feel like there was some normalcy in this very not normal time for us. So it was really nice. We really have not seen people, and so getting to see family was really good.
Yeah, glad you got to do that.
Yeah. And we have a dock here on a little pond and some fish, and so my brother-in-law got to fish, and we're like, hey, if Christmas on a dock is not a bad way to spend it. So it was really special.
Not at all.
Yeah. So obviously, we've been through a challenging 2020 and are now embarking on a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, and now are embarking on a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for 2021. It's very interesting how people feel like there's some switch that's going to be flipped with now starting a new year, but I appreciate the optimism and excitement for a fresh start. And I think all of us are looking forward to that for sure. Yesterday, at home group, you and I were talking about, and Maddie were talking about kind of setting some intentions for 2021. And we used one word to set those intentions. Would you like to share your word for 2021?
I would love to share my word for 2021, which, as it happens, is share.
Yeah. I didn't do that on purpose, but I did remember that your word was share.
Yes. The words that spring to mind for me, which I don't completely agree with, as I shared with you yesterday, but Jackie Robinson said, a life is not important except in how it impacts other lives. I think a more appropriate description would be a life is mostly important in how it impacts other lives. And so, as you and I have discussed before, the prospect of making my privilege and all the opportunities that I've had, all the good fortune that I've had, making that mean something for other people, that's really important to me. And 2020, I think all three of us on this call were blessed in that the events of 2020 did not hit us as hard as they hit many people. We were far more fortunate than many. And the prospect of flowing out to everyone who's had it a lot harder than we have, that means something. It's really important. And sharing both in this venue, this is a really important place to share, and in mentorship and in work with nonprofits and so forth. That's something that matters to me, and that's kind of how I think about that.
I appreciate the sharing that you do on this show for sure, and all the books that you read and the insights that you have, which are a privilege. It's a privilege to have access to that knowledge. It's a privilege to have time to engage with that knowledge. And we appreciate you sharing that with us here for sure.
Thank you. And you?
Yeah, my word ultimately was space. I actually didn't get the prompt for home group because my phone got stolen. No, not my phone. My phone number got stolen in what is called a port out scam. So beware, folks. It was not fun, and it is still not fun. It is still impacting my life in very obnoxious ways. But we talked about it live, and ultimately I came to the word space as my word, and that I wanted to use 2021 to create some intentional space in my life. And I'm not so good at just doing some of the basic things to take care of myself, like taking time to eat and sleep. And, those are pretty basic things that I can rub off the margins of things in my life. And I want to try to fill it with some of the most important things first, and then have space for those things, have space for the most important things in my life, and then fill it with the other things that are kind of the extras. So that's what I'm going to work on in 2021, and for the purpose of being more present and having a greater impact on other people.
A version of that my dad told me about through childhood, but then he really kind of hammered it a little bit in 2012, I think, was I was really I was feeling tired all the time. And he said, well, what are you doing for yourself? And I said, well, I'm doing this, that, and the other. And he says, but is that for yourself? Really? Is it just for yourself? And I said, well, it's like I can share this with other people. And he said, son, the most valuable chill time for you is going to be something that has no redeeming social value at all. It's not something that you feel like you need to do for any reason. It's read a trashy novel or play video games, but don't play the new video game that everyone is talking about. Or if that's what you want to play, great, but it can't be for that reason. Get away from the zeitgeist with your chill time. And I took his advice to heart and started doing chill stuff that was just purely 100% for my peace of mind. And that made such a difference. And it can be tempting to say, oh, I should do this while like the tendency to multitask with our relaxation time is enormous. The temptation is enormous, that is. So I hope that you're able to find the space you're looking for. You're so good at this kind of thing, at introspecting and saying, okay, what can I do differently? And I know you'll do well with this, but I hope that it does well for you as well.
Thank you. Well, that was a long intro, but it felt appropriate for coming back into the new year. So let's jump into our episode. And today, our guest is Bill Price. Bill is the president of Petrophysical Solutions, an oil and gas exploration knowledge products company based out of Houston, Texas. He has been a petrophysicist for over 40 years. He has comprehensive and diverse experiences, and a lot of that has led to this data source that he has that he now sells to customers. And he is an expert in specifically log interpretation and integration of log data with geological and engineering data operations and well site geology. He's traveled extensively internationally, lived in a few different places, experienced the peaks and troughs of the energy market, which is part of the game for sure. And he has learned to adapt to the business and to the changing dynamics in oil and gas. He talks a lot about that on the show and how it has led to many challenges, but being able to pivot around those challenges has also led to many opportunities. Specifically, about 10 years ago, he began pivoting his company away from a traditional consulting model to offer high-quality databases of well log and production information for public data sources. And his primary sources of revenue are major operators in the Gulf of Mexico. So he really talks about that in the show and provides a really interesting arc of the company and the way that they think about revenue differently now. Bill and the company have been very active in the community, volunteering and making financial contributions to local charities. We appreciate all that Bill has done, and we hope you enjoy his insights. Welcome, Bill Price, to the show.
And it's a beautiful day in Aggieland.
We welcome Bill Price to the show. Thanks for joining us, Bill.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What is your favorite superpower?
I have a picture of myself my mother took when I was about 6 years old, jumping off of a picnic table with a cape on.
Yeah.
And And I thought, actually that's a great superpower, just being able to fly, because then you could just kind of back off and you could fly over things and just chill out and look at the beauty. And there's a song by Guy Clark that always reminded me of that, and it's called The Cape. And the last line of the song is, he did not know he could not fly, and so he did. And I told my kids, you can always put that on my tombstone.
Yeah, I love that.
I always thought that was a great line.
I love that. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up?
I grew up living in a lot of places. My dad was an engineer, so we moved. We started in Kansas and Houston, and then we moved overseas to London and Tehran. So I went to I think I went to 8 schools in 11 years. So it was always learning to adapt, learning to make friends. It was that long walk, when your parents would take you to a new school and you'd go walking down the hall with the principal, and he'd open the door and say, "Class, here's your new student."
Oh yeah, like the TV shows.
Yeah, and so you learn to make friends quickly and adapt to things. And I hear that from a lot of people on your show, that same thing of managing that sort of chaos in your life. As a kid growing up, you don't know there's anything different. You just you go with what's there, and so I think that was an interesting thing. So we saw a lot of things growing up. Ended up in South Carolina and went to college at Emory in Atlanta. It was the closest school that was far enough away that my parents couldn't just drop in on the weekend, without announcing it.
Yeah, I've driven by that campus many times. I lived in Atlanta for a few months. It's a very good school, very well regarded. How many in your family?
So I grew up. I was the youngest of 3 boys. It was kind of coming of age in the 60s and 70s. It was a bit of a challenge, I think, for my parents to have sort of 3 hellions that were always looking for things to do. So I've been married now 34 years almost, and have 3 kids, all of whom are, my youngest is in senior year at George Washington, and the rest of my kids are out working. Nobody's married or anything yet, but 3 of them are Aggies, and then the youngest and myself went to sort of Eastern liberal schools. So who knows, maybe there's hope for us one way or the other, whether we're majority Aggies or we're bookended by liberal Eastern. Take that nice. How you want.
Right. Tell us about your first job.
Well, I started out. I got a geology degree, a bachelor's, and I struggled with school and had some not so good grades. When I came out in 1980, the oil industry, I really didn't know anything about the oil industry. Fortunately, my parents had moved back to Houston, so I came here and figured I'd try to find something. I started out working on rigs and going out in the oil field, and it was interesting. It was you really were the low man on the totem pole. You were the bottom of even below the roughnecks and everything so you started out very much at the bottom, but you learned a lot and you worked a lot. You would go out for work 7 days a week on a 12-hour shift every day, and you might go out for 6 or 8 weeks straight without a break. So there obviously wasn't a lot of social life involved in that. So I did that for a few years, and then I decided that was enough, and I got a job at a small exploration company here in Houston. And the week I joined, they put the company up for sale. So I immediately went into waiting for the new owners, and we got bought by a company, Houston Natural Gas, which was run by Ken Lay. And we were one of the companies that got bought up and became Enron. And as I told you the other day, the very first thing that happened was I got laid off. And,
excellent.
Yeah, it was great. It's actually, and I counsel friends and people in the oil business, and I said, you can either make it the worst thing that happens to you or the best thing that happens to you. And so in 1985, I was thrown out on the street, and you have to learn to sell yourself and your skills and what you can do to people, and so again, skills that end up building the opportunity to build a company like this. And that's what I tell people: make it the best thing that happens, not the worst thing that happens to you. I did that for a number of years, and what you find is then of a sudden, if you've done it for 10 or 20 years, you've now become the old guy in the industry who is the expert in it. I've always taught my whole career. I think even at my first job, 3 months into the job, I was teaching that job to new hire people. So I've always involved in teaching people and sharing what I've learned.
And you've now been the founder and president of Petrophysical Solutions for over 25 years. Tell us about how you've evolved and pivoted as the market has continued to change.
We started out very much as a traditional consultancy, and a lot of the clients that we developed I worked for a software company that sold commercial software that does the technical aspects. So I had some clients from that I naturally followed into, and so a lot of those people who were my clients in the software became my clients in the consulting business. So we had very traditional sort of a law office business model where you worked, you got paid a percentage of that billable, and that worked very well. We were busy from day one. We ran at 100% capacity for 20 years. We really were just going wherever the work was, and we had some really tremendous people that have worked here.
Right.
About 5 years ago, when the shale boom started and the price of oil kind of started to slip, it was the first time in the company's history that we weren't running at full capacity. And so we had a lot of people, very good people that we wanted to keep. And we looked for the opportunity to, what can we do as a company? We had, in conjunction with all this, developed a database of wells in the Gulf of Mexico, where we put a lot of intellectual property time into it. We developed and did the value add that's required for oil companies to use that.
Right.
And I saw as early as about 2010, 2011, really, that the consulting business really was not working as a standalone. And so it was just not making enough money to keep it open the way we were running. And so we began to pivot the company, and we went from a 90% consulting and 10% data sales, and we shifted, and we're 90 or 95% data sales and about 5% consulting now.
Okay.
So in consulting, your the number of hours times the number of people is times your rate is what you're going to get. And with data, we sell the same data set over and over, so it's a little bit better margins.
Yeah. If you could go back in time and give yourself some advice when starting the company, what would that be?
I tend to make a lot of mistakes, and I don't consider myself an expert in anything, but I do think I've made more mistakes than anybody, so I've learned from those, and if that's what becoming an expert is. But I think I would say is, don't worry so much. It'll happen.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of the early years it was hard to attract people. It was the oil companies were still had a lot of people working, and so it was a bit difficult to attract all the people that you wanted or that you needed or that were exactly what you were looking for. So we had some challenging times, and really trying to protect your reputation and your relationships became challenging. So I worried a lot. I worried about making payroll. I worried about those other things, and I think I told you, I said, I think I cracked every tooth on the, just, grinding my teeth, worrying. So I think going back, I said, don't worry, it'll happen. Just And something that happened for me is I just developed a lot of faith in what we do and the people we have, and rely on that. Don't worry about it so much.
How did you deal with the market volatility of oil and gas through the years? It seems like sometimes that market is just going bonkers in a good way, and sometimes it's going bonkers in a bad way. How do you handle that?
It's been a real challenge. I came out in 1980 at kind of the peak of the peaks. At that time, I think there were something like 4,500 rigs running in the United States compared to about 300 right now. So, you take 10% of the existing business that was out there. And so it's been a series of real heavy peaks and troughs, really, really sharp high peaks and troughs. We've stayed pretty busy through most all of those times until about 2015. We were, being a small company, and not having to answer to investors or necessarily a board of directors, or it has allowed us to pivot things quickly. In 98, 99, I think the price of oil hit $8 back in West Texas. And I could read the writing on the wall. We were busy internationally, but I knew that was going to kind of come to an end. And we actually sat down and talked about it and said, if we're going to survive, we're going to have to lower our overhead to virtually as small as we could get. And we actually ended up laying all the employees off and brought them all back as independent contractors. And it's we went through 3 different lawyers just verifying that we could do something like that, because there's a lot of laws and rules, IRS rules, the state of Texas rules that you want to make sure you're not violating anything. But we were very comfortable with what we did. And at first, a lot of the people were a little put out and were real unsure of that. Within about 2 years, they actually understood what a great opportunity that was, because as an independent person, rather than being in a defined benefit plan with a company and a 401k, where if you're lucky, you might put away $17,000 or something if you max it out, is an independent running an IRA SEP, you can put $50,000 a year away. So if you're actually making enough money, you can put much more in. Most of our people were 20 plus year people. They weren't. They were really looking at, what am I going to be able to put away for retirement, and how fast can I do it?
Yeah.
And so it really kind of ended up benefiting everybody, kept our overhead low, and allowed people to actually make more money and save it the way they felt like they wanted to, and invest it the way they wanted to.
Yeah. What is your vision for the company now, and the work you all do 10 or 20 years from now?
Well, right now we're kind of going through an interesting time. As I mentioned to you earlier, I'm kind of at the point where I'm going to step away from it. I'm kind of at a point in my life. I'm not quite where I thought I would be retirement age-wise. I was going to give it a couple more years, but I think it might be a good time now to. I've got a tremendous group of young people that we've hired through internships and brought into the company. They're ready to take this thing, I think, and move forward. I'll be here to help mentor them. So on the short term, most of our business is in the Gulf of Mexico with those operators that work in the deep water. There's maybe 8 or 10, 12 companies out there. We're already in 8 or so of them. So we've penetrated the market pretty much, and we're actually looking at rolling that part of the company into sort of a consortia business model where everybody just pays a fee to participate and stay in it and gets updates and new data as we add it. And what that does is that smooths out your revenue stream right now and gives. You can keep costs set for the client, so the client knows going into the future they're only spending so much money, and then the company, the people that stay on know they've got a kind of a consistent revenue they can look towards, and and count on, which is something we never had. I mean, it's always been, you get these big pops of revenue and then you go 18 months with very little revenue, and it's a lot of cash management and things. So 10 years down the road, who knows? I can't figure out what the oil business is going to do in 3 months, let alone 10 years. But I think there's always going to be need for people who do this type of work and high quality work. And I think that they'll take it forward. Marketing, the company was always built on personal relationships, and a lot of those people that I built the business with are retiring. How that's now picked up, and do we do more of social media marketing? Do we do it more on the internet, or do we still try to rely on developing those personal relationships? And that's going to be the challenge for the young people. And I'll be here to work with them and help them, but on a day-to-day basis, I'll probably step away and look for other things for myself to do. But I will probably work out some sort of a plan where the employees can just buy the company and take it and run with it.
Makes sense. And you've talked about how the people that you were in the business with during this time are retiring. What have you learned from making hires over the last 20 years? What have been the most important things you picked up about that?
Well, it's been often challenging. You can hire people. You can look at a resume and it looks great. It looks like it fits the bill, and you can talk to people and they can talk the talk. But when you get them in and you throw them into a situation and can they actually perform? It's been really interesting over the years to watch people coming out of, say, big oil companies where you spend a lot of time going to meetings, you spend all kinds of time doing things other than actual work. We get paid for producing work on a day-to-day basis. That's how we make money. So if we don't produce work, we don't get paid. So a lot of times I would hire people coming in with, like when Amoco got bought out by BP, I picked up a lot of Amoco people, and you could just watch them, the stress that it put them into to actually produce work day in, day out. And several of them I just went to said, look, it's killing me watching you, suffer. Go find a job with a company, please.
Yeah.
Another people came in here and they thrive in it. They really thrive. But it's a challenge as a business to really vet people. We talked the other day about an ideal person. Yeah. That's a tough thing. I said, I always thought, well, at times, was it somebody who is involved in the church, or are they, they're, and no, that's not necessarily always true. But I have noticed that people who cannot manage their personal life, whether it's financially, relationships, really make bad employees, bad contractors. They bring that to work. Or, we've had people over the years who and it's a typical problem. They'll have credit card debt, they'll have student loans, they'll have car loans, and they're so deep in debt that they don't control their life. And I know we all started. I started that way as a young person. That's the trap you fall into. I started out that way, so I've lived through that, and I've just noticed that people like that, sometimes their motivation is not always that I'm doing the best job. It's, am I making the most money, or how do I make the most money? And that sometimes is not the best thing for you as a company.
Yeah, no question. Well, and in terms of how your life influences your work, you've had to make a lot of lemonade from lemons yourself. Would you tell our listeners about your 2001?
One thing, I had a benign brain tumor in 2001, and I had surgery, so I lost my hearing in one side, and of course, as I'm getting older, I'm losing my hearing in my other side. So there's a little bit of isolation that happens, and you start to appreciate what deaf people go through and how challenging that can be. But then I also, we talked about life, work-life balance. And I can recall a very specific a day when when you have your own company, it's everything, and you put a lot of hours in. I was working Saturdays, sometimes half day Sunday. And I just thought, I've got young children. This is crazy. I need to be there with them. And so one Saturday, I mentioned to you, I stayed and I was sitting there on the couch watching cartoons with the kids, and they kind of looked over at me and said, "Why are you here? What are you doing?" "Well, I'm watching cartoons." And my wife got up and said, "Hey, well, what are you doing here? Why aren't you at work?" And I said, that's an eye opener that, the kids grow up and pretty soon they're gone, and you never get that back. So I started to say, okay, I've got to work a few less hours and maybe work a little smarter and spend time with my family. And so those were a couple of things that kind of happened right there.
When we spoke the other day, you used the phrase "stepping in the trap" regarding the work-life balance stuff. Is there, that kept sticking in my mind. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that part of the conversation?
Well, I think it is, because you start something and you can easily get consumed by it, because it's everything you're betting on, or you're dreaming on, and it is very easy to lose that sight of the other things that are important in life. And
right.
You do your work. My dad grew up as a workaholic. He that was the thing. He worked all the time in order to provide that lifestyle, or that the privileges to his family, and that is important. But money isn't the most important thing in life. It can't buy you health. It can't buy you happiness. I tell people often, the more money I've made, the less happy I've become. And so there is that balance there somewhere, that you're achieving whatever it is your dreams are, your financial goals are for that. But you've got to have that time to get out and do the other things that enrich your life or and help other people.
So you said the more money you've made, the less happy you've become. Is the retirement process an effort to, stabilize and recapture? Or what is that all about?
I think at this point, that's why I said, I thought, I'm still young. There's a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of things that I want to do. So it may be a great time right now to step away and say, what other things are there? Like I said, I've been doing this kind of thing for a long time. I think I have mentored other people starting companies who have come to me and said, you've been doing this. Many of the companies, when I started this one in the 90s, have failed. And so there are very few of us that started back then who actually have lasted this long. So there's something that we have done here that works from a management and
no doubt.
So there's a lot of things that I think I could bring to the table in helping people starting up new companies that maybe don't know how to manage things or how to accomplish things, and I can help with that. And so I'm going to look for opportunities there, and I'm doing things also that are non-business related. I think I told you I started taking classes several years ago and doing woodworking and hand tool woodworking, and so I do that kind of thing. And I actually have a piece on display at the Texas Furniture Maker Show in Kerrville right now, and I won my very first participation ribbon for.
Congratulations!
So I think it's a great time to in a downturn when things are the economy. There's always opportunity. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there right now.
So talking about the downturn in the market and so forth, you've mentioned that it's been difficult to figure out exactly where your fit is as the boss and as someone who is maybe transitioning out. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, first of all, I don't ever come to the office at 8:00 anymore.
Nice.
So I made an appearance just for you. since a lot of this has begun, I just decided the work wasn't there.
Yeah.
And just kind of going back, because of the way we were structured and we paid such a high percentage of that billable to the people doing the work.
Yeah.
There was always, in order for me to make my personal financial goals, I had to bill a lot of my time. So not only was I running the company, I was billing sometimes 9, 10 months, 11 months a year of my time. And in 2015, when things started to dry up, I've always given the work to the people here so that they make money. And I was always the last one to do the billable work if it was needed.
Right.
Because I kind of treat everybody here as family in a way, and I want them to make a good living. If they're not making a good living, then they'll leave and go somewhere else, perhaps.
Yeah.
So in order to keep people, I always tried to make sure that they were taken care of. Well, 2015 came, and the bottom sort of fell out of the whole outsourcing and consulting market. I stepped back from doing a lot of technical work, gave anything that came in to the people that were working here. And then we had saved quite a bit of money, so we started developing new databases and trying to do some new products that were not as successful. But we invested quite a bit of money in doing that and trying to keep them busy. For me, it kind of left me sort of, because running the company didn't really require a full-time person. So it kind of left me at a point where I was searching for things to do. During that period, I lost my brother. I lost my father. So there were some personal things on a sense of loss and sense of loss of my need in the business in a way.
Yeah.
And so it was a struggle, and it took some time to kind of put that together and say, okay, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Well, this company runs itself pretty well. I mean, there are things that do. It's got a very our client base, our clients that have been with us 25 years. We have tremendous longevity of our client base, and so it's a great time, I thought, during this sort of COVID shutdown that we're in, and the oil price shutdown, to step back and say, okay, what do you want to go do? Again, what's that work-life balance? And there are a lot of other things I don't even know what I'm going to go do right now.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go do something, and who knows? Somebody may watch this podcast and call me and say, hey, come and talk to us about doing something. Who knows? I listened to one of your podcasts yesterday, and the speaker said, the place you were meant to be is right where you are right now, and so who knows where that will be a year from now. But wherever it is, that's where I'm going to be.
Fantastic. PSI supports a lot of local charities in Houston, and you've discussed the idea that that's important from a company perspective, in addition to, in addition to getting personal value from it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I think I kind of talked a little bit about growing up overseas and seeing things and recognizing, and I mentioned this weekend an incident that happened way back when I was in 6th grade. My father was a project manager in Iran, and they were building concrete forms, and this was down on the Persian Gulf in a very poor area. And they just, without thinking, took the plywood and the boards, and they threw them over the fence and out in the desert, and people were rioting, and actually a person was killed trying to get these pieces of wood that was so important to him. And he had gotten called into a meeting, and I sat in the next room. He took me down to the office, and they were in the boardroom talking on the phone, and I was listening to this emergency they had, and it really struck me. And as a 6th grader, you really, again, you don't know how to process things like this. And later on, we went down to the job site, and you drove through the villages, and the people live literally in shacks that they put together. I remember seeing one, the side of it was a Coca-Cola billboard, and that was the side of their house that they lived in. There's no electricity, there's no plumbing. And as you travel the world, you see just some tremendous poverty in large. In this country, we have a lot of poverty. We have a lot of inequality, but we are so blessed in this country to have so many riches. And the company, when I started it just took off, and it was based on things that we had built and failures I had previous. But this company just really took off and did well. And I've always believed that the company or a company has a responsibility to give back to its community. And what we tend to do is we tend to support local charities that support people, either Star of Hope, Mission, Generation One down in the 3rd Ward, which is an early interventional educational facility, which is my wife is on the board of directors there, as a matter, and does some development director, assistant development director there. Tremendous organization out here in West Houston, West WAM, which is West Houston. So Houston Assistance Ministry. So I've always felt that we have a responsibility. We're called to serve others.
Right.
And certainly on a personal level, that's true. But I think it should carry into the corporate level as well, and not just for PR sake. But I mean, I've never really talked a lot about this in 25 years of the company, but it is something that I've believed in. We've consistently given to the same 8 or 10 charities over the years and supported them. It's just something I believe in, and I believe, and I hope as the company goes forward that the people here continue that and see that is a responsibility.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so too. Let's move to some rapid fire. Okay. What do you consider your most valuable failure?
Boy, there's been so many of them and so spectacular. So I think the most valuable one is the one I'm going to make next, because I know I'll continue to make failure. And it's how we learn, and it's how we learn how to succeed. So here I am getting ready to go off into who knows where, and I suspect I'll have some failures at that. So I will learn from those, and I will then go on. So I think it's the next one.
What specific habit have you developed recently that you would say has greatly contributed to your success? I
think I've been very patient and forgiving with people over the years. I tend to have a lot of patience with them. I know it takes, especially hiring new people it takes us about 5 years to develop a person here before we actually put money on them. But I don't seem to always show that same patience and forgiveness to myself. So I'm working on trying to be more patient in the personal endeavors and towards myself, of self-patience and self-forgiveness. In woodworking, and I do this, the mistakes you make are generally because you try to do something because you're hurrying to get it done, or you're tired at the end of the day and you say, well, I'm just going to do this one more cut or this one more joint before I shut it down for the day, and you make a mistake and you end up with a big problem. And I've always wanted to put a sign on my workshop wall that said, the most expensive tool you own is impatience. So I'm trying to teach myself, hey, it'll be there tomorrow morning when you can come back in fresh.
Yeah.
Don't be impatient, and then you just get mad at yourself, and then you don't forgive yourself for being impatient.
There you go. Anyone you would like to send good bull? We end each session with a recognition of someone else for something good or great they have done.
Kind of relates back to connections and where you are. I had a client when I was at the software company, Randy Mitchell, who was at Conoco and Aggie from 74, and he convinced me to take the job at the software company when I was considering it. Yeah. So I took the job. He became my client. The software company went bankrupt a couple years later. I ended up on a consulting gig with Conoco for 4 years working for Randy. and he became my mentor, and I was doing support work for him. And then later on, he asked me to help him find a job, and I placed him into another company. And then as he retired, he said, "Can I come work for you?" And to me, that's one of the best compliments that we can get as a company, that somebody would say, "I admire what you guys are doing. I'd like to come." So he's been here 6 or 7 years, and recently lost his wife, 45 years, and he and his family are just tremendous examples of who we ought to try to be. Just very strong family, very humble, very always willing to offer help to people. And so for me, it's been a real honor to have him come here and work. And also my wife. My wife is kind of keeps me grounded. Whenever I get the tough decisions, I have to go to her, because she's always the one who walks me through them and shows me the right way to go.
Yeah, same here. My wife keeps me in check as well. So good bull to Randy, good bull to your wife. One other question: where should our listeners follow what you're doing?
Well, I'm not much of a social media person, but I am on LinkedIn. I was dragged onto there by a marketing person we had at one point.
Yeah.
We also have a website at petrophysicalsolutions.com. And then I'm under Bill Price on LinkedIn. And I want to thank you for the opportunity. This has been a lot of fun. Like I said, this is my very first Zoom call, so I hope I pass the interview, and maybe I can do this again sometime.
You did great. We are very grateful for your time and wisdom, Bill. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed the episode with Bill. For our MasterCast top 3 takeaways, I wanted to start with the pivot that Bill made from being a consulting company, a traditional consulting company that gets fees, to a company that sells data to their clients. And he talked about how now with that pivot, they can sell that data over and over and over again and really get value out of that. And they might offer consulting services on top of that. So they have multiple sources of revenue or multiple streams of revenue, but that the revenue is really coming from that recurring sales of that data. And one of the things that struck me many years ago related to entrepreneurship was this idea of really thinking differently about the different revenue streams that are possible for a company and how important that can be for helping that company to adapt to changing environments. So I'm sure you've had some experiences with this. Like, for example, things are so different now than they used to be. You used to have a product and you sold that product.
Yeah.
Now, a company like Uber has revenue from a rider getting in a car, but also from ad sales on the app or ad sales in whatever, right? So there's ad sales, there's revenue they might get from charging a fee to the driver. So thinking about all of the different sources that are available is really important in thinking about fully capitalizing on the market. So for example, your podcast business, if you're just thinking about consulting revenue, that might limit the opportunities that are available. Whereas you could provide services related to equipment acquisition. And I know y'all are doing these things. You could provide services related to equipment acquisition. You could provide services related to editing. You could provide a course of some kind that is evergreen, that is available, that clients could take over and over and over again, kind of thinking about the model that Bill used with the data, right? There's an ability to think about what's more passive revenue that this company could generate besides just kind of the high dollar revenue of the consulting aspect of it. And I think those are really important ways of thinking about a company that oftentimes get missed.
Well, and then pushing on the other end is what is pulling you away from what your core business is? Like, where is the line? Because there's proverbs on both sides, right? Newspapers didn't see the internet coming. And like, that's the soundbite. And then there's also so-and-so got away from their core business and it killed their company. So, like figuring, so the question at the crux of this issue is, where is the line where your core business ends? and you want to push as far to that line as you can in terms of considering new opportunities, and then stay away from everything on the other side of that line. So where is that line? That's the question.
I agree. I agree with that. I think, though, if you think about the core business, there are probably a lot of revenue streams that are tangential to that core business that companies miss out on, because they're thinking we have this one product or this one thing that we do. They're not thinking, oh, we could install that product, or we could provide services in this way. We could have a subscription service after the fact of the sales that would provide revenue in this way. So it's just opportunities to think about that revenue a little bit differently that could have a big impact on the business, even within that core business area.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I guess the challenge is, what's the revenue possibility? What's the floor? What's the ceiling? What's our expected value, from pursuing this, and how directly can we make it flow out of what we're already doing? And if you have enough potential, then it doesn't have to flow directly out of what you're already doing necessarily. Like, you can apply some of the pieces that you already have and then undertake a project to develop the rest. And many people would argue that newspapers should have been doing this 15 years ago, but that's another story. But yeah, no, I totally agree with your way of thinking about it. I think is the right way to think about it. That's really good insight.
For our second takeaway, I wanted to talk about the isolation of hearing loss. Bill talked about hearing loss and how isolating it can be. I've read a lot about the connection between hearing loss and memory loss because of people like kind of being unable to engage in conversations as much, or feeling like they're kind of outside of the conversation, not hearing all the context of the conversation and things like that. I had sudden onset hearing loss in 2018. So I basically lost most of my hearing in my left ear. And it was really, really disorienting. The fact that I then was missing a lot of conversations. I still do, but I've learned to adapt to it a little bit better. But missing parts of conversations, feeling like if I'm not in the middle of the table, for example, or at least where most of the conversation's on my right side, then I don't feel part of the conversation. It can be really difficult. And I appreciated Bill putting that in the context of hearing loss as a source of sort of isolation.
Yeah, no, I have not experienced that, but it seems like that could be devastating in the right situation. Now you've started coping with your sudden onset hearing loss. I don't think we've ever talked about this before.
I don't know.
If you had to give a piece of advice to people that this happens to, what would you say? What have you learned from the process of coping with it?
Well, my first piece of advice before even getting to coping is, if you experience sudden hearing loss, go to the doctor immediately and get on steroids. I forget what they said, that they ended up giving me steroids later in the process, but I actually went to the doctor right when it happened because it was super disorienting. And they were like, "Oh, your ear canal is," and I went to a general practitioner who was very good, but I went to a general practitioner and she said, "Oh, your ear canal is probably just swollen and clogged. Like, ultimately, I should have gone to an ear, nose, and throat specialist immediately, because if you get on steroids very quickly, but it is a very small window, like 2 weeks or something from the onset of the hearing loss. If you can get on steroids really quickly, then it might be able to prevent damage, but it might not." And so, one, I would just say, if it happens, go to the doctor, because it is challenging. And then the coping advice that I get is always super frustrating. Like, I have elected not to get a hearing aid, not because I'm embarrassed about it. I still might. I just haven't done it yet because the doctors have been like, you don't really, really, really need it. So we don't really recommend it. Like, just ask people to repeat themselves. I'm like, well, that's really annoying. I just have to do a lot of things that like position me where people are on my right side, where if there's a lot of noise in the room, I try not to be in rooms where there's a lot of noise, like restaurants are difficult still. And so, I can still engage in the conversation, but I just have to put myself kind of at the left end of the table so that I can hear everybody from the right side. But it's, I'm fortunate that it's only one ear, and so I can make it work.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that and are having to deal with it.
Yeah. It's okay. It can be frustrating some days, but it is okay. But I appreciated the way that Bill kind of summarized that. So anybody else with that experience, it certainly can be isolating. It can lead to memory loss because it is harder to be part of the conversation. So being aware of that is really important. And I thought Bill explained that very well. For our last takeaway, Bill referenced the Guy Clark song, The Cape, which is one of my favorite songs in the whole wide world. And it's such a pretty song, but it also really talks about staying young and thinking that you can fly, because that is, I think, half the battle, that we oftentimes think about our limitations maybe more than our ability to accomplish something. And that song is just such a good reminder to always trust the Cape. And one of my favorite lines that says that is, all these years the people said he's acting like a kid. He did not know he could not fly, so he did. And I love that concept of, if we don't know we can't fly, we will. So keep flying out there.
Chase the thing. Do the thing everyone says you can't do.
I love the thing you said about your dad in the intro. Just do the thing that you want to do. Make space to do the thing that you want to do. It doesn't have to be this lofty goal, but do the thing that you want to do. Act like a kid every once in a while.
Yeah, that's actually what you just said, I think is really important, because when people say, and I think that teachers, when giving this advice, may be guilty of this a little bit. They say, go do the thing. Go chase your dream. But there's an implication there that it has to be something big, that it has to be, go act in movies, go be famous, go do something that the world will know you for. Chasing your dream doesn't have to look like that.
I like that. It's a good message for 2021.
Dreams can be small too.
Ben, do you want to close us with a quote?
I would love to close this with a quote. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can shatter souls. Words matter. Choose wisely. L.R. Nost.
Choose wisely. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help. Whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted, go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.